Pleasant good day, everyone. I want us to take a few minutes today to do a quick conversation on chapter 5. I know some of you are still working on your reflection, you're working on your commonplace book, you're reading through you're getting the course in your system, you're learning, you're unlearning. And chapter 5 offers quite a bit of conversations, and I want to highlight a few things because I want, as we prepare to do this work, I want us to be intentional about certain things. And so chapter 5 specifically talk about abolitionist teaching. There's a lot of conversation we have talked about as we talk about culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, as we talk about how do we ensure that our students feel a sense of belonging, how do we disrupt anti-Black racism, disrupt anti-oppressive practices, and all of this come together in the abolitionist teaching, how we teach a liberatory kind of teaching, a teaching that says, I see you, I care, I love you, I'm concerned, I've prepared for you, I've planned for you, I'm going to make sure and ensure your success as a student. And that comes from the idea, and that also ties into the idea of freedom dreaming. And I love this phrase. I love this a lot because we are honestly aware of what is happening in our society. We realize there's pushback, there's resistance, there's white supremacy, there's racism, there's homophobia, there's all this these oppressive practices. And the truth is, if you are gonna, like I've said many times, if we are gonna stand firm and be strong and be those educators that our students need, then we have to walk into those classrooms with freedom dreaming. We have to walk into this classroom wrapped up in hope, not a pretend hope, a hope that is aware of the struggles, a hope that is aware of the barriers, but a hope that also says, I am here to create a space that you can not just survive, but you can thrive. And that is what freedom dreaming is about. It's about imagining a school, imagine a space where all the things that you and I so desire for all our students, no matter how they identify, no matter their color, their race, no matter their abilities, no matter anything, that space we desire, that all students will feel that sense of belonging. It's wrapped up in our freedom dreaming. And of course, it's circled and underlined and punctuated with Black joy. And that is what keeps the fight alive. That is what keeps hope alive, having that joy. And of course, you're going to realize, as I'm sure many of you already been thinking about it, that the term Black joy comes from a place of not just, hey, I'm happy today, but it's come from a place where it's resistance. It's a place of that you sustain, even knowing that there are barriers and there are implications around you for how you will grow and survive and thrive as a Black educator. And so one of the things I like to use when I talk about Black joy and talk about survival and resistance and thriving, I go to James Baldwin. He says, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be enraged almost all the time. And I use this a lot when we talk about, why are you angry? And I always say to people, there are many persons of color and Black people who struggle with their anger because they don't want to come off as angry. And I, for one, I've talked about this many times, that I am fine. I am absolutely fine showing up angry in a space. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine showing up angry in a space because I have a reason to be angry. For me to show up in spaces all the time, smiling and happy and pretending that the world is skittles and rainbow, that is pretentious. That is not only pretentious, but that is also dangerous for my health. And so, therapists will tell you to sit in your feelings for a while and to accept your feelings and to feel what you need to feel. A lot of us come from this place where if somebody dies for you, people say to you, well, don't be sad, don't be sad. Sadness is a feeling. Sadness is allowed when somebody dies. Sadness is allowed, and anger is allowed when you are hurting. And we talk about trauma, we talk about pain, we talk about hurt. And how do you talk about those things without talk about being angry? And so for me, being angry, being enraged, absolutely is okay. But also going back to the idea of Black joy and freedom dreaming, if we are in rage all the time, if you are angry all the time, if you cannot find a space to have hope, I want to underline that as Black educators, if you cannot find a space to sit in hope, it is very, very concerning, and it is also dangerous. It is dangerous to your health. I'm going to repeat that because I feel the need to underline that. If as a Black educator in this space that we're living in, and seeing what is happening around us when it comes to all the oppressive practices and institutional racism and the ways that we see that ourselves and students and communities are disengaged and excluded and marginalized and suppressed and oppressed and gatekeep. If you do not find a space where you can work on your healing, work on your love, work on your identity, work on yourself, work on your dreams, then you are in a very dangerous space. And so what I love is that Bell Hooks, I want to bring Bell Hooks in the conversation, because Bell Hooks is the one that talks about home place a lot. It's a concept that is very new to many of us. Bell Hooks talks about that from 1990. And Bell Hooks says, historically, African-American people believe that the construction of a home place, however fragile, whether it's those days a slave hut, a wooden shack, had a radical dimension. One's home place was the one site where one could freely construct the issue of humanization, where one could resist. Black women resisted by making homes where all Black people could thrive to be subjects, not objects, where we could be affirmed in our minds and hearts despite poverty, hardship, and deprivation, where we could restore to ourselves the dignity denied us on the outside in the public world. I want you to understand how powerful this idea of home places. And that is why I really wanted to not continue this course and not share chapter 5, because I believe how powerful it is that I share the idea of a home place, a site of resistance. And as you look into it, there's an article, you can Google it, home place, a site of resistance. It's a really good article to read, to give you to consideration, to think about what an home place is and how important it is for us to create home place. And I see there's a lot of new scholars who are doing work on creating a home place for our students, from all kinds of students. But of course, this was written mostly as we're thinking about Blackness, and we talk about the fragility. Even home place, we talk about, what I want us to understand is the fragile. Even that place is fragile. A slave shack, a wooden hut, but it was still the only place. So I want you to think about that. No matter how fragile it is, I want us to really think about that. No matter how fragile it is. This video is created for 5708, but I also need to share this video with 5704, because I want you to understand that as you look at the issues within schools and the issues in urban spaces, you know, even when I'm speaking, I can feel my body reacting to the very issues as I think about them. But on the other side, I have to say to myself, as an educator, how am I going to create home space? How will my classroom reflect that space where for students, teaching them with the highest expectation is my goal? I can protest in the streets. I can do all the stuff, but how do I create social justice-centered curriculum and teaching approaches? And that is why I'm feeling this chapter 5 in so many ways. I could not allow us to not have a deeper conversation. And chapter 5, this was one of those chapters I shared with you that really impacted me. And after 26 years of teaching, this chapter inspired me in a way that I am yet to understand. It went on the inside. And so as we think about that, you know, we think about the ways in which, and I hear we hear the reality. Some will stand with their students to end gun violence. You know, some will fight to end the present industrial complex in our outside of school. Some will fight in effort to communities can be peacefully govern themselves. And some will do a combination of all of these. The important thing to understand is freedom. We are trying to create those spaces. So whatever you are doing, whatever way, ask yourself, what will I do to create that own place for my students, where they feel seen, where they feel heard, where they feel cared for, where they feel respected. But I'm going to also underline something, because this is an element we're dealing with in our school board, where they also feel corrected and disciplined in the right way. So I don't want us to think that home place is not a place where there's the omission or erasure or disappearance of respect and discipline and order and structure, because I think a lot of time we get that twisted, that if I am going to show my children love and care and respect and create a home place, then there'll be no discipline, there'll be no rules, there'll be no regulation, there'll be no timelines and deadlines, there'll be no structure. That is a joke. That is not true. Home place, if you think about Black mothers, take yourself back to Black mothers and parenting. If you think about that, home place is a place where there was also care, there was discipline, there were order, there was respect. There's a yes sir, yes ma'am. Home place is a place where you recognize and respect the elders and your elders and your ancestors. It is a place, and I want to spend time to talk about that, because within our school system, we are seeing the terminologies and we are seeing the reaction of many of our teachers towards love and care. And they're thinking, well, if I'm not going to punish you, if I'm not going to stream you, if I'm not going to oppress you, if I'm not going to lock you up, if I'm not going to call in the police, if I'm not going to send you home, if I'm not going to do this, then I guess I'm not going to do anything. And that is a trick that we have gotten caught up in, that because I love and I care for you and I've created an environment of belonging, it's not going to include discipline. And that is a lie. A space of discipline is a place of belonging. A place of love is a place of structure and care that says to you, do not do that. You may get hurt. Do not touch the fire. It burns. Do not stay out late. It's dangerous. Make sure you complete this task if you want to be successful. Here are some of the ideas in which we operate for success. It is not a free-for-all. I want to underline that, because I'm sure you're going to read and you're going to understand, when you see what happens in society, how many teachers have given up caring for our students in a way that gives them structure and discipline and give them order, because they feel like, if I am going to create love and care, well, it's going to be devoid of what discipline and structure is, and that is not true. And so we talk about what's been happening, and she took us back to history, talk about the Emancipation Proclamation of January the 1st, 1863, and that slave holders forced enslaved Black folks to remain in bondage. The ways in which we are still in bondage. You know, I'm doing the lecture I'm going to do with you on the 31st. We're going to talk about who are we without colonization. I told you before, I want to make that a very special evening and a very special lecture. Who are we without colonization? And the fact that the need for emancipation happens at so many levels. And so we see that freedom here was short-lived, because the system, we talk about systematic racism, systematic oppressive practices, the system and structures of oppression, dark people, was not abolished at the root. And so we see those things. So I ask you a question. What does freedom look like in your classroom? When we're living in a time of oppressive practices, what does freedom look like in your classroom? Hurt in our schools. You know, sometimes when we do workshops and we do conversations about what happened in school, there's always this almost weirdness that we talk about our students, our children being hurt in school and having trauma. Their dreams are snatched in school, their self-esteem shattered. But somehow we do not want to include the people in school as being responsible or participating in that. And the truth is, deficit thinking in school, stereotypes, assumptions, dreams denied, dreams shattered, self-esteem disrupted. These happen in school, and they happen with the stakeholders. They happen through our leaders and our teachers. And so we have to sit in self-reflection and ask ourselves, am I contributing? What am I doing? Am I contributing to the trauma and the fear and the hurt and the pain and the sadness? I'm contributing to that? Am I complicit? If I'm not contributing, but am I complicit? Have I called out the way I should? Have I speak up? Have I stood up? Have I raised my hand? Have I gone to secure a seat at the table so my voice could be heard and my advocacy could be enacted? Have I done my due diligence? It says here, the work done in fees was still done by dark bodies long after Emancipation Proclamation. How are we still holding our students? It's here again, she goes back into history talking about the 13th Amendment abolished slavery unless punished by crime. And so we talk about the school to prison pipeline. We talk about the ways in which Black bodies were deliberately put in prison for the simplest of things, because they needed a prison labor system. We have seen that. We are still seeing that where we had drugs, the war on drugs. There are still people who have yet to understand this, the American war on drugs that sweep the nation, came into Canada, sweep our spaces, where so many Black bodies, so many racialized bodies were put in jail for a ganja spliff. And today, today we see who are the millionaires through the same drug. And we're still having arguments about pardons and criminal records. What an hypocrisy. What a level of oppression and what a level of oppression. And we don't see that. And so the achievement gap is not about white students outperforming Black students. This is something we need to understand. This is a narrative we need to rubbish. It is about a history of injustice and oppression. It is about the educational debt that has accumulated over the time to the educational survival complex. It is one of the fallacies of justice to know that the achievement gap is due to race and class, and yet another proclaim racism and white rage as the source of the achievement gap. And yet, never look at that. There's more to why many of our racialized students, our Black or dark bodies, are not doing well. And it's rooted in systems of oppression. To commit to imagining, so here we get back to that beautiful space that I love us to be at. To commit to imagining, to looking beyond the given, beyond what appears to be unchangeable. It is a way of warding off the apathy and the feelings of futility that are the greatest obstacles to any sort of learning and surely to education for freedom. We need imagination. I say this to you and I feel chills run through my body. We need imagination. I've listened to some of my students who are in college And you're already discouraged. I want to speak directly to you who is just teaching for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I want to speak to you who are my teacher candidates here at the University of Toronto. And you have already expressed your level of sadness about the system. I want to say to you, if you do not have the imagination, do not go into the classroom. I did say that. If you do not have imagination, if you do not have hope in what could be, if you are not willing to freedom dream, I am telling you, the classroom is not for you. And I say that without apology, because our students are going to look to you for imagination. They're going to look to you for freedom dreaming. They're going to look to you for hope. They're going to look to you with their dreams and their aspirations. They're going to come to you, as we say, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And if your energy says to them, this system is shit, and there's nothing we can do, and it makes no sense, then you have failed them yourself. So walk into that space, not as an hypocrite, but walk into that space with hope, wrapped up in hope. And so abolitionist teaching starts with freedom dreaming, everybody. I use this picture because I fell in love with because I know what it's to laugh like that with my tongue between my teeth. And you laugh in a way that comes from the deepest part of your being. So the image for me is intentional. Abolitionist teaching starts with freedom dreaming. The dream's grounded in a critique of injustice. Let me say that. It is grounded in the critique. But these dreams are not whimsical. They are not unattainable daydreams. They are critical and imaginative dreams of collective resistance. You are not going to do this by yourself. That is why I crave and I protect community space, and I believe in community class. As Professor, I saw this on Professor Clelia Rodriguez's social media when she said, community is not networking. It's not the same thing. It's not just getting together, have a glass and a wine and be cute. Community is work. Community is pouring in. Community is saying, I brought my water, let me pour it in the well. So anyone who is thirsty can pull from it and drink. Because guess what? There's going to be a day when you who carry water will need to pull as well. That is community. Their imaginations are fueled their resistance. Imagining being free. Imagining reading. This is what helps. This is what pulls me. If you want to know what helps, what motivates DR.ABC, I have tons of things to share with you. But this book, I told you, I cried in chapter 5. I cried. I was walking and the tears would not stop. And this is one of those verses, those quotes. I said verses. This is one of those quotes that pulled on me. It said their free imaginations fuel their resistance. Imagining being free, imagining reading, imagining marrying the love of your life, imagining your children being free, imagining life and not death, imagining seeing the world and imagining freedom. These freedom dreams drive out apathy, and the quest for freedom becomes an internal desire necessary to preserve humanity. Are you freedom dreaming? How are you freedom dreaming? As an educator, as a teacher candidate, what are your freedom dreams? How will your classroom look like? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about the love you have, the power you have, the imagination you have, the gifts, the talents? I remember having a student right here in the Master of Teaching program. She was in my anti-discrim class, and I watched the way she would love music, and she's a big on music, and she sings and she plays. And I said to her, I hope you take all this music in your class. And I remember I went to see her teach in a school that was very, very diverse in the Durham region. And I'm going to use certain identity because I want you to get the context. This is a white student, white young lady, and she was my student. And I said to her, you need to make sure you bring all of this to the classroom. I said, you're going to see the kind of teacher you're going to be. She smiled. She said, of course, Dr. ABC. She was on my list for practicum in the Durham District School Board. And I came to see her, and I can never forget. I left her classroom. I was so full. I was so full. I say to you now, and I feel it. I was so full when I left her class. I think she was teaching, it was either social studies, grade 6, or it was a science class. I can't remember. But the joy and the freedom dreaming and the music and it filled the classroom. And I pulled her aside and I said to her, do you realize how your love and your passion for music and joy for teaching has filled the classroom? It's filled the classroom. She looked at me. She looked at me eyes to eyes and she nodded. She knew exactly what I meant. She walked into that classroom with such a joy. I am saying to you, I hope I'm speaking to one student. My job would be amazing if only one of you, even one, listening to this, and I know many of you will, but if I could encourage one of you to think about your teaching statement, to think about your philosophy of education, to think about how you will walk into the classroom, especially in a room with Black bodies and racialized students, and understand your power. Teachers from around the country are forming organizations to freedom dream new teaching methods, classrooms, community partnership, and school system built with intersectional social justice at the root of their foundation. How are you freedom dreaming? Too often, I want to speak to all of us. Too often, though, not always, our allies are eager white folks who have not questioned their whiteness, white supremacy, white emotions of guilt and shame, the craving for admiration, or the structures that maintain white power. I want to say to all of us, how are we self-examining? You have heard me say this a million times. We have talked about Yolanda Seeley-Ruiz's idea of the archaeology of self, but way before we even talked about Yolanda Seeley-Ruiz, we have talked about how do we understand who we are, our social location, our lens, who we are, our lived experience, and how those things have allowed us to sit in bias and assumptions and deficit thinking about others, how those things have allowed us to not love as we should, allowed us to not teach as we should, allowed us to not celebrate Blackness as we should. And so we have to understand. The writer said, I've personally witnessed allies take over the conversation and make the meeting about their singular issue. They act as an authority on a community they have never lived in, and they stop freedom dream because they are not interested in tearing down systems that benefit them or their loved ones. But not the rest of us. I think I read that wrong. Let me read that again. I need to read that again. I have personally witnessed allies take over the conversation and make the meeting about their singular issue. They act as an authority on a community they have never lived in, and they stop freedom dreams because they are not interested in tearing down systems that benefit them and their loved ones, but not the rest of us. They also do not know how to work their privilege for dark lives. Again, I call on us to reflect. I call on us, especially my white teacher candidates. I call on all of us. I call on you. I call on all of us to say, are we thinking about who we are? And so you have heard the word a lot about co-conspirator. You have read the book, you have seen the chapter about James Tyson, about what co-conspirator looks like. Beyond the symbolism of their efforts is an example of solidarity, trust, and the deliberate centering of a Black woman to be the face of justice. Tyson was more than her ally. He was her co-conspirator. But we need to stop using big words and new words and fancy words and 2023 terminologies and fancy only because we want to co-opt it. We don't intentionally understand anything. And so I close to ask you, where are you in your journey? Who are you in this work? Who are you in this course? Who are you in this program? Who are you as an educator? Who are you returning to OISE to do your master's and your PhD? Who are you sitting in a classroom for 5, 10, 15, 12, 17, 26 years? Who are you? Are you doing the work? And remember that I said to you, there are many ways to do this work. Many ways. Many ways to be a courageous co-conspirator. Many ways to be an advocate. Many ways to be that teacher. And so I love this. I love this part. I've used this a lot. I talk about how do we think about the work and think about the work, understanding where we stand in relation to systems of oppression, building authentic relationships, honestly acknowledging and confronting those imbalances. Social change work, understand that it is rooted in humility and collaboration and accountability. I've seen a lot of people want to be community and want to do social justice work, but they are not accountable. This work holds you into accountability. Can't be reckless and carefree and then you say you want to do this work. It doesn't work. We have to depend on you to show up when you promise to show up. We have to depend on you to speak up when you promised you would speak up. We have to be able to depend on you to write, to research, to speak, to pull a seat at the table when you said you would. And also, as we talked a lot about the interior journey, So we come to one of my favorite words. We talk about that is the introduction. Joy is crucial for social change. Joy is crucial for teaching. Finding joy in the midst of pain and trauma is a fight to be human, fully human. Joy is self-care. We cannot freedom dream without joy. I have seen teachers who come to me and they have the best ideas. And when I listen to them, I realize there's a high level of sadness. And I say to them, take some time to find your joy so you could do this work well. I say to them, take some time. Joy provides a type of nourishment that is needed to be dark and fully alive in white spaces. Joy provides a type of nourishment. And I'm going to go very personal this time. People ask me about my joy and ask, have you always happy? And I said, no one is always happy. Are you serious? But I learned long ago that my joy is power. I could let you do things that piss me off. I could tell you, oh, I'm using those words. I have been in many white spaces where I listen to things and my skin crawl and I'm discouraged and I'm like, oh, really? And immediately I know what that can do to me. I know what that can do to my body over days. I know how that can let me go home and just want to watch TV and just go to bed. I know that can make me cancel an engagement and an invitation to go up because I don't feel like bathing and dressing up and walking outside. And I know that I have the power to protect my joy. And so what I do intentionally, unapologetically, is to protect my joy. So there are certain things that I do that people still question. And I've said to them, I am protecting my joy. I know how to uninvite myself to a space. I want you to listen to what I just said. I know how to uninvite myself to a space. I know how to exit a space. I know how to say, well, I guess I'm supposed to be here for 5 hours. I guess my day's done in 35 minutes because I'm not going to sit in that. So we have to understand, as it says here, joy provides a nourishment, and that is what gives me strength. And it's needed for you to exist and be fully present. And so as we wrap this conversation up, I want to leave with you a couple of just reminders. I'm going to go through this part very quick. A reminder of what Black joy is. And to realize that Black joy happened in spaces where we were oppressed. These pictures of old slavery days. We also see, and I don't know if you noticed, but within this picture, it's very intentional. We see the white gaze in this picture still. We see that. But we have to still perform joy. We have to still, I use the word perform joy versus living in joy. And both are needed. Because sometimes you have to perform joy so others within the community could understand what it means to navigate. That conscious act of joy is a resistance in a society shaped by oppression, racism, and violence. I choose joy intentionally many times. I choose to show up very joyful and loud and tall and bold and amazing because I understand the space. And I trust and hope and pray that many of us will get to that point where you understand a space is oppressive, racist, and violent. But as an act of resistance, you show up, and you show up in your full self, which is resisting. Black joy is an affective feeling of pleasure and elation. It does not rely on what is happening in the world, but springs. Brown and Brown says that. Spring forth an internal state, less dependent on external conditions. And this is why I am free, because my joy is way less dependent on external conditions. The truth is, I wish a lot of my joy would be dependent on external conditions, but it is not. And for that, I am thankful. Black joy is life breathing, free from chains. Quote here from Golden and Utah. An anti-racist language arts pedagogy is incomplete without Black joy. Centering Black joy within an anti-racist pedagogy allow Black people to be more than their struggles. Anybody's reading this with me? It allows us to be more than our struggles. If it's anyone who know about our struggle, it is me. It is I. I could tell you, raise my hand first to tell you our history. But we are more than that. When I went back to Ghana to visit last year for my first time, and then I went back again this year, I was wrapped up in Black joy in ways that I almost felt like I confused my own body. It's almost like I confused my own body. And I share experience I had on my YouTube page. You can go there, see the bad experience I had in Ghana. But I also, at that very moment, hours after that incident happened, I remember where I was, and I remember my right to joy and my responsibility to the demonstration of Black joy in a space that joy was not supposed to happen for me. It's a divine purpose in action, paying homage to our ancestors. Didn't even remember that this quote was coming next when I talked about Ghana. Celebrating of sacred. It's a living embodiment of our innate birthright of joy. And you can see where some of these conversations are coming from, so you can do your additional reading there. And I love this. Audre Lorde said, I'm still learning how to take joy in all the people I am. I love this. And how to use all my cells in the service of what I believe. How to accept when I fail and rejoice when I succeed. Bellux joins the conversation. Bellux says, loving friendships provide us with a space to experience the joy of community in a relationship where we learn to process all our issues, to cope with differences and conflict while staying connected. Another person joins in the conversation and talks about this joy is not an absence of grief or rage or a distraction. It is insistence. I love this quote. I love this quote. And so I won't say much about this. I talk about myself in a lot of ways, especially my intersection of being gay, being Black, being immigrant, coming from a low socioeconomic place, never having certain access and opportunities. But I've always said it. I said it in my interview for the job here at University of Toronto. I said I've always freedom dreamed. As a young teacher who was going through a lot, I found a space in my heart to freedom dream, and I brought the children with me to freedom dream. I told my little children whose school was at the train tracks that the world is bigger than this community we live in. But I said to them, those planes you see pass in the sky, they are going to beautiful places that we can go one day. Self-determination and self-advocacy is key. And I'm going to say something very strong right now, and I want you to get ready for it. Way too many of you depend on others for your joy. Way too many of you, your joy is tied to someone else. And if they don't smile, then you don't get to smile. Way too many of you are in connections and relationships and spaces where your joy is tied to others. You have to be brave to step out into your own joy. And of course, community is important. Like I said to you, it is important. You have to bring the water to the well so you can draw from it yourself and engage in Black joy. I want to leave you here. I want to leave you here. I want to leave you here as you consider. Take note of all the resources that we shared in both presentations. Take note of all the resources we shared in both presentations. And I want to encourage all of you as you exit my course. I encourage you to join me on Instagram at Teachable Moments at DR.ABC, or add me to your LinkedIn page so we continue to grow and learn from each other. It's important. It's very important. Remember, abolitionist teaching, freedom, and Black joy.